Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the latest episode of the Footmarks podcast. I'm Behram Qazi, who you can find at Def Mango on Twitter. And with me is my colleague Shayan Ahmed Khan. You can find him at Tweets by Shayan on Twitter. And we are here to talk about Cheteshwar Pujara's test career. Of course, the title of this podcast is The Great Wall of Cheteshwar. And that took a lot of thought from our part, I suppose. And I'll get into all of that fun stuff, but just to let you guys know before we get into the mix of things, all of our podcasts on Good Areas, they are powered by our supporters on Patreon. And you can become one of them by going to Patreon/Good Areas podcast. And then you can enjoy ad-free content, talk to us exclusively, and give us recommendations for shows as well. All right then, Shayan. So, the Great Wall of Cheteshwar, it's obviously a pun on the Great Wall of China. And it came to me when I woke up today, because I was thinking, of course, he's the Rahul Dravid successor, batting at number 3 for India. Of course, Dravid is the better cricketer over here and the better number 3. He's faced the most number of balls in Test cricket history, and he's the 5th highest run scorer as well. But the one thing that he shares with Cheteshwar Pujara is his grit. Both of these guys are extremely gritty, dogged. They put an extremely high price on their wicket. And when we talk about grit, it's not just their forward defense. It's all the leaves. And at least in Pujara's case, it's all of those body blows that he used to cop as well. So quite a lot of similarities over there, don't you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I think India have actually been very lucky to, find the successors for both Rahul Dravid and Sachin Tendulkar right in the next generation. With Cheteshwar Pujara at 3 and Virat Kohli at 4, I think it was a very successful duo for India at 3, 4, and even Rahane, up to a point, even Rahane was a very good batter in test matches. And so for that reason, I think, yes, absolutely. And Pujara's style of play is very similar to that of Dravid in a sense that he will put a very high price on his wicket. He will not get out easily. And even if he is not scoring a lot of runs, he will consume a lot of balls.
Yes.
And what that essentially does is that makes the new ball older, right? And that makes life easier for your number 4, number 5, number 6.
100%. Continue.
This is something which even I think Ashwin brought up, and for some reason I think people took it a bit out of context and they were like, okay, is Ashwin trying to downplay what Kohli has achieved? But no, it is the truth, because that's exactly what Kohli himself goes on to say in his tribute message for Pujara, that thank you Puji for making my life easier at number 4. And it is very important, to have a batter at the top who can, really soak in the pressure, play out those good spells, bat time, because with the landscape of Test cricket shifting the landscape of Test cricket really started shifting in his very time, right? So not every batter has been like him. We'll talk about a few batters who have some similarities with him, but now in this post-Pujara generation, we'll probably see even fewer batters like him, I would suppose. So he was one of the last of a kind in a sense, I would say.
Yeah, there are a few of those guys who are similar to him, right? Who have all mostly retired now. You think of the likes of Dean Elgar, Azhar Ali, maybe throw in a Dimut Karunaratne in that as well. And of course, we will talk about similarities later on. But, as far as Cheteshwar Pujara's legacy goes in Test cricket, right? I mean, there are a lot of contributing factors, and I think his legacy isn't limited to one of those, factors. But grit does stand out. I feel like you mentioned how he was great at batting time. It is very important to note because, as you mentioned, right, like you are delaying the entry points of your number 4 and number 5 batters and making life easier for them. And the interesting thing about Pujara is that, he was very, very old school in his methods, right? Like his blocks were as blocky as they can get. And he played a vital role in that Indian team, which first rose to prominence, becoming the number 1 team in the world. And then, of course, they have that great bit of success later on in the World Test Championship as well. So he has left a lot in terms of legacy. But grit is something that really does stand out ahead of all of those things, because he was, extremely difficult to get out. Like you would really want to see the back of him. And I suppose Australia's seamers can tell you a few things about that.
Exactly. I think it was Josh Hazelwood, right, who was like really tired of bowling to Pujara after a point. I mean, they must have thought like, okay, when is this guy going to get out? Is this guy ever going to get out? The way he batted in those last 2 tours of Australia, of course, 2018-19 was his magnum opus, I would say.
Yeah.
And, even in 2020-21, he didn't get a lot of runs compared to the previous series. But the fact that he consumed so many deliveries, if I'm not wrong, I think he played like 928 balls. And him playing at one end, really opened up the likes of Rishabh Pant or a Shubman Gill and they could bat more freely because they knew that there is someone of Pujara's caliber there at the other end. And not
Absolutely.
only that, it's also about delaying the entry points, like I said
Yeah.
before. What that does is that makes it easier for Rishabh Pant, right? It's as simple as that. So when you want your attacking batter to come in at around the 50th over, after the 30th over ideally, and usually I think in that 2020-21 series he was coming around the 50th over mark, if I'm not wrong, and that is pretty much ideal. That's what you want, and that's what India were missing in this last series, I would say. Because Rishabh Pant often had to come in early, as India didn't have a very solid number 3. And India still haven't found their replacement at number 3 to quite an extent. You would have to say that.
It is a bit of a
Whoever they
dying
have tried,
breed.
that hasn't really worked for them all that well.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think it is a bit of a dying breed, right? In terms of where Test cricket is at these days, we're seeing a lot of false number threes, and Cheteshwar Pujara held on to that position for like a decade, almost a decade, right? And over a decade actually, but like he had his phases in that. And I suppose like if you look at his career holistically, you'd have to say, or at least this is what I think, that I feel like his batting was not defined by the number of runs he played, but by the number of balls that he faced. And that's pretty much what we've been talking about thus far.
Yeah, completely agree with you. But I think we also have to remember that it's not that he was an extremely low scoring batter in the sense that he never made any runs, but he was just batting there. He also scored runs. The guy did average like 43.6 in Test match cricket in this generation. And I think probably if you talk about the Fab Four, then after the Fab Four, you might have to talk about someone of Pujara, right? Someone like Pujara, right? Like he's in that conversation with the likes of Azhar Ali or a Dean Elgar or, or David Warner, those sorts of guys. I mean, not in terms of style, obviously Warner was very different, but I would probably have, David Warner, Pujara and Azhar Ali in that next tier of, the best batters that we've seen in this generation after the Fab Four. So, and at home, he was an absolute, he was an absolute icon at home, I would say, because he scored a lot of runs and he would score big runs at home.
Yeah.
And that was very important because in Asia, what you want is, you need big runs on the board in the first and second innings, right? And he was able to give you that successfully. And obviously, we have all talked about him in Australia. That was, I think, just absolutely brilliant from him, whatever he was able to achieve there. And
I mean,
India clearly missed him this time. I think I will say that again very clearly.
Yes. I mean, I don't think there are any, two ways about that. Of course, this was not like the sort of tour where I would go on to make a claim that, Pujara should have been there, because Pujara had regressed. But they missed that kind of batter.
I was going to say that.
It's that kind of batter that they missed, and that particular skill set where, you have someone who is facing the new ball more often than not, 90% of their career, and they will grind you out to the point where they suck the soul out of you. I think that is what Cheteshwar Pujara was. But as you mentioned, it's not just the gritty nature of Pujara that made him special. Another big thing, I suppose, which was a part of his game that he exceeded in or excelled in, was his spin game. You probably have the numbers handy as to how much he averaged versus spin as opposed to pace. So I'm guessing, I haven't checked, by the way, I'm guessing it is either in the high 50s or early 60s, the average versus spin.
I don't think it is in the early 60s simply because of the wickets that they played on towards the latter end of his career, But I will actually go and look this up because I haven't looked this up. But my guess is it would be around 51, 52. If you look at his overall average against spin.
I think it has to be over 50 at the bare minimum, because Pujara was an exceptional player of spin, right? And that's why he's averaging north of 50 in Indian test matches, right? His home test average is 50 plus. So, do you have the numbers?
Even in Sri Lanka, he has been excellent. His innings, he played that 145 in the third test of the 2015 series, and that he carried his bat. Like, he had to open the innings. I think Murli Vijay was injured, so he came in place of him and he scored 145 runs against Sri Lanka. And, that was a very important series for that new Indian team, and they went on to win that series. That was a must-win game for them as well. So, I think that even it wasn't just that he was scoring runs in India, he also made runs in Sri Lanka. I believe he has had a good test match in Bangladesh as well in the last tour that India went there. So I think he's a absolutely brilliant player. And we also have to remember how his battles versus Nathan Lyon, right? So in Australia, often we're just like, okay, we talk about playing spin in Asia, but playing spin in Australia is also a unique challenge of sorts, isn't it?
Yeah.
And you are actually right. Pujara does average 61.5 against spin.
There you have it. I win.
Yep.
Because that's what I was thinking.
You do.
Sure, you
In
can
India, he
consider...
averages 52. Yes.
He's averaging 52
I think
in
that's
India.
what I was looking at.
That bit I checked. And I completely took a shot at the dark when I was guessing his average versus spin bowling throughout his career. Because that's why, I thought to myself that sure, he has played on several ranked turners as well. But he's playing spin bowling overseas also. So his average has got to be pretty goddamn high. There was a clip recently in which, the ESPN Crick Info panel was asking him or throwing names at him as to who is a better spin player, that player or Pujara. And the only person where Pujara doesn't hesitate was Yunus Khan. He's like, no, Yunus was definitely better than me. But even like with the likes of Kohli and Steve Smith and Kane Williamson, he was like, yeah, you know what? I was kind of better than those guys. So I really enjoyed that bit. And while we're at it, Shayan, can you also look up how much Pujara averaged on ranked turners versus spin bowling? Because I have so at Pro Sports, we also have Patreon and our, paid subscribers group is called Janis of the Podcast. Over there, someone, shared his fall, basically, the last 5-6 years where he has a drop off. And they were like, ranked turners really screwed him over. And I was thinking, I don't remember Pujara being that bad on ranked turners. So that makes me really curious as to how he fared.
I mean, I would just say that for Pujara, what really happens is that post 2020, he also doesn't make post 2019 actually he stops making a lot of runs that he was. I think that up to that Border Gavaskar trophy of 2018-19, he was averaging well above 50 if I'm not wrong up to that point.
So I actually have the
I have
breakdown.
that handy with me. Yeah.
I have the Crick Info breakdown, though I know your breakdown is a bit different. But up until the end of 2017, he averages a smidgen under 53 with the bat in Test cricket. And then 2018 onwards, right until his last Test match in 2023, he's averaging 34-ish in like 49 Test matches. So the drop-off is there. And of course, this coincides with the pace-playing pandemic as well. The wobble seam delivery, becomes mainstream. And Pujara, based on that evidence, was a victim of it. So, tell me more about ranked earners, though. I really want to know that.
Yeah, so I was just looking up. So the way I'm looking at this is, I'm looking at his matches in India, where the top 7 average for his teammates was less than 30. Of course, this is not like an absolute metric because, it could also depend on a lot of other things. What if it was like maybe a seam-friendly track at some times? I remember Kolkata in 2017, and he actually made runs in that innings as well. So just if we look at the innings where the rest of India's top 7 batters average less than 30, so in all of those test matches, he had an average of 44.88.
Well, there you have it, right? So
That's a pretty impressive mark.
He's not struggling. He's actually averaging more than his career average in the test matches where everyone else is struggling. So his match factor is good. And that myth is more or less dismissed, I would say, where, ranked turners screw him over. I feel like, if anything, the wobble seam delivery screws him over.
That definitely, I would have to say, because I think what happens with him is that in England and South Africa, he isn't at that level as that he is in Australia.
Yeah.
And even in New Zealand, I don't think he made a lot of runs when they went there in 2020, although everybody struggled and those were also tough wickets to bat on. And that sort of, that started the decline even for Virat Kohli, I would say. But Pujara's decline really starts a year earlier, I would have to say. So I have his year-wise average handy with me right now.
Yeah, no, I remember that in his first 54 test matches up until the end of 2017, that's where he's averaging, a smidgen under 53. So year-wise average, I also have handy with me. It's basically after 2019, as you say, that he really, starts to struggle. He has a good year in 2022 where he's averaging 45, but it's not even close to what he's done in the past. And if I look at Pujara in different host countries, of course, we all know in Australia, he was brilliant. He's averaging 47.28, right? Bangladesh, as you said, he has a good test match and he's averaging 74 over there in 2 test matches. England, yes, plays 16 tests, is only averaging 29. So lateral movement over there probably got the better of him. In India, he's an absolute behemoth. 51 test matches, averaging 52.58. And then, of course, New Zealand, 4 test matches, an average of 20. Not so good. South Africa's a similar story. 10 test matches, an average of 28.15. Sri Lanka, though, as you very rightly pointed out, 4 test matches and he's averaging 90.8. So that's his favorite place to bat. And the West Indies also, it drops off to 20.33 in 5 matches. So you could say that if you look at just Indian test matches or test matches that he played in India, Australia, Sri Lanka and Bangladesh, those are all-timer numbers.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And I think if we just break it down by match factor as well, so I have the numbers handy with me. So compared to the top 6 batters, excuse me, so compared to the top 6 batters of both the teams, In Australia, he has a match factor of 1.29. In Bangladesh, it's 2.26, although it's only from 2 test matches.
Yeah.
In Sri Lanka, it's 2.68 from 4 test matches. And in India, it's 1.47. So absolutely, you're right that in these countries, he's really at his best. I would say, though, that in South Africa, he averages less than 30, but some of that is because of the wickets they've played on. They haven't really batted on very easy surfaces, and I believe Kohli was brilliant in South Africa, but apart from him, Rahane was also decent, but usually batters go there and struggle because batting there is not really easy. And Pujara did make runs in the 2013-14 series where a lot of other Indian batters also had a good time, and India did lose that series, but they had that very close test match, and I think that really brings us to a very big innings that he has played. He scored 153 against Dale Steyn, Vernon Philander and Morne Morkel at the Johannesburg. So, I mean, this isn't just, like, we are not just talking about a batter who is only blocking and, it's not that he doesn't have these iconic innings as well. He has a lot of those memorable performances. And this actually, and it was a second innings century, mind you. So what this does is it helps India set up a big target. They don't win the test match because weirdly at the end of that Johannesburg 2013 test, both teams go defensive. India don't chase wickets and South Africa don't go for the target. But, the fact that the game ended up going that far was because, Pujara made that 153 in the second innings. Like, it was one of the big reasons why that happened.
That was a really, really odd test match, but it's a very important innings to recount as well. So thanks for that. I'm sure our listeners and viewers are really happy that you brought it up. And you also mentioned, or at least my biggest takeaway from your little rant over there, was Cheteshwar Pujara's match factor of 1.29 in Australia, which basically, in layman terms, means that he was 29% better than every other batter that he played, with in those test matches, even including the opposition team, if I'm not wrong, right? And I want to dive deep into his exploits versus Australia. But before that, we will be taking a short break. You guys are watching Footmarks with Behram and Shayan, and go nowhere because we will be back in half a minute or so, and we'll be talking about Cheteshwar Pujara versus Australia.
Occasionally, I also talk about behind the scenes stuff. A huge thanks to everyone who has supported us on Patreon and helped us build this channel. Join our Patreon community and unlock exclusive benefits. Enjoy AMAs, live calls with me, and connect with fellow cricket enthusiasts on Discord.
Welcome back to the Footmarks podcast. You guys are with Behram and Shayan, and we are talking, or celebrating, in fact, the test career of Cheteshwar Pujara, or the Great Wall of Cheteshwar. Anyway, I left us at, a little juncture over here where I wanted to talk about Pujara's exploits versus Australia in test cricket. Overall, he's played Australia a lot, both home and away, and his numbers are impressive. So 25 test matches, 2,074 runs, an average of 49.38, 5 tons and 11 50s. And, it's incredible how I feel like when we think of Pujara versus Australia, it's actually his knocks in Australia that we think about most. Even though even in India, his first series versus Australia, he does well, right? But it is those two Border Gavaskar trophies in particular where he is so crucial towards India's ultimate, victories. And India had never won in Australia before that, mind you, is that I feel like when we discuss his legacy, it really stands out. Like, it's almost like poetic that this guy, had his finest hours or brightest moments in an Indian cap down under. And when I mentioned body blows earlier in the podcast, that's what I'm thinking about. I'm thinking about Pujara on Australian surfaces, just copping blow after blow after blow. And it really, whoever is a proper cricket aficionado would really appreciate all of that, because I feel like future, generations, when they read up on Pujara, those are all the articles they're going to find.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that lasting memory of him in Australia has to be his effort at the Gabba in that fourth innings, him batting time. He played how many deliveries did he face in that innings? I mean, I remember he took 11 blows and I watched that entire series live. Like, I was absolutely logged in for that series. And, in that series, there was also this discourse on Pujara's strike rate. And I think even Ricky Ponting had pointed out that, maybe Pujara should bat with a little more intent. Maybe he should look to take more chances. And I believe even Jared did a piece on him at that point, saying that, does Pujara bat a bit too slow? But I think the real thing that we need to understand is that there are different types of batters. You cannot expect a Rohit Sharma to, not go after a spinner. Or you cannot expect a Virat Kohli to not look for the drive outside of them, because in a way, these batters are wired to, that's how they score their runs, or that's how they, try and, I'm not getting the right term, but they make sure that the bowlers are not able to bowl on the right lines and lengths.
Yeah. Plus,
by
I think
their style
what
of
you're
play.
what you're trying to say is that batters or really, really good batters, they do cash in on their USP. So even if you've got a fine leg in place for Rohit Sharma, if you bowl it short, he is hooking or pulling
He
it.
will try and get it
Similarly,
on.
if you've got 4 slips in a gully for Virat and it's at a drivable length outside off stump, he's going to go for that cover drive. Whether or not
Maybe
he
even if it
connects is a different story, right? And he obviously did connect for a long period in his career as well, that 16 to 19 period in particular, right? Where Virat just goes absolutely apeshit. And Cheteshwar Pujara, his natural method or approach towards batting was to just grind it out, stay out there, bat time. And if that's what he's good at, then that's his role. And if you really think about it, it's probably the best way for a number 3 to go about their, innings.
Yeah, I think I don't really have a lot of issues with that in particular. I do think back when I was a fan, I used to get a bit, I was a bit disappointed that maybe he was not making a lot of runs in South Africa and England in particular. Although I would have to say back in 2018, the series that they played in South Africa, he does get run out a couple of times. And I think that was, when Virat Kohli was once asked, who do you think is the worst runner between the wickets, he does mention Pujara, because in that aspect he wasn't, because, and maybe even because, Kohli is also that sort of batter who will push for every single, and Pujara's style is a bit different. So I think obviously it doesn't really matter all that much in the long run of things. And the kind of batter that he is, I think when we talk about that Indian team and what they achieved at home, they did not lose a single home series for more than 11 years, but it almost
More
12
than
years,
that,
right?
man. I think
almost
almost
12
12 years actually. Yeah.
Exactly. So December 2012 to this New Zealand series of last year. So in that time period, I would have to say that Pujara was also a very, very important part of that team. So obviously the 2 spin bowling all-rounders with Ashwin and Jadeja, Virat Kohli, and it has to be Cheteshwar Pujara. And then you have to talk about the likes of Umesh Yadav and Riddhiman Saha and all those different sorts of role players that India have had, and that has kept changing. Later on we've had Rohit Sharma do well, and Akshar Patel came in, Rishabh Pant, all those guys, Bumrah towards the back end. So, but I think who really starts it, I think Pujara is a very, very important part of that. And he does deserve a lot of credit for that. And
he was
away from home, as I mentioned, India won twice in Australia, and he was very important in both of those wins.
I
So
think he was an integral cog in that Indian team. And of course, Australia was a big part of that, at least his legacy. It's a massive part of his legacy. But overall, if you look at, his spell as a number 3 batter for India and all the success that India have had in that period, you'd have to say maybe after Ashwin, Jadeja, maybe throw in a bit of Bumrah in there as well, because when Bumrah starts doing Bumrah things, India really become invincible in many ways. And then Kohli, of course, is there, and Rohit 2.0, in Test cricket at least. But Pujara maybe is a bit unsung. And you also mentioned that there was at times a lot of criticism on Pujara's strike rate, but he was unfazed by it. It's not like he ever let any of that stuff get to him.
Yeah. No, so I was actually listening to this podcast. I think it was the Last Wicket Boys who were doing a podcast on, Pujara's career. And I was just listening to them when I had gone out for a walk. So they were also bringing up the strike rate conversation. And I remember what they said was, there is some sort of a logic. And even, the team management, like I think even Ravi Shastri and Virat Kohli wanted him to play with intent. So what really happens is that because of the pace playing pandemic, batting does become a lot harder. So maybe that approach of, digging in for a long period of time may not always work, because what if that ball that has your name written on it comes and then you're just out? So maybe in that sense, I think we have to, sort of add that nuance to it, that maybe there is an element of truth to it. Maybe if he had, and I think that was a big reason why Kohli also declined, because his strike rate also dipped in his peak, in his decline. And I think what happens is, if you don't have a lot of scoring options on tougher wickets, then sometimes, it won't really be the same, and you will eventually get that one delivery that has your name written on it.
No, I think I do agree over there, and there is some nuance to this argument, right? Because if you are playing in tough batting conditions and you are going for a blockathon, you are not really exerting any pressure on the opposition team, and they can get all over you. And that does happen at times in Pujara's career, and in that last little while, right, those last 4 years, it tends to start happening a lot. I feel like that becomes a very mainstream sort of conversation, and maybe he doesn't deserve heaps of criticism for it, but it's not like it should be criticism free either. So because we're good areas, we've got to look at all those aspects, right?
I agree. I completely agree. And I think what really happens is that all the three, big batters for India, Virat Kohli, Cheteshwar Pujara, and Ajinkya Rahane, all of them decline at the same time, in a sense. Of course,
Yeah.
I think Rahane's decline starts a bit earlier than Pujara, then Kohli. But
Yeah.
then the fact that it overlaps for a time period, it means that India's batting, and I think in a way they were lucky that Rohit Sharma had a great 2021 and Rishabh Pant also came in. So, and of course India's bowling was very good, so it sort of mitigated those batters not doing as well. But I think certainly all of them declining at the same time was not ideal for the Indian team. And if you go back to 2019, you probably weren't expecting that, right? Like everybody was scoring runs. It was like probably the peak as an Indian Test fan, I would say, that 2019 home season where everybody was just scoring a lot of runs. They were defeating teams comfortably. But I think because of the WTC, there was an incentive to, go for those wins. And maybe because of that, what happens is they look to go for more result wickets. And that definitely, took a few runs off their batting averages. But I think that's fine. That's part of the game. And obviously, we have to factor that in.
It worked for the longest time, so you can't
Yeah, it
really
did.
blame them for it, right? I feel like strategically, I don't have many issues with it. Yes, you could maybe say that in the long run, you are not preparing batters to spend a lot of time out in the middle, but that's the only
Yeah.
real criticism I have with respect to that approach. But anyway, this podcast is about Pujara. And before coming to some of his deficiencies, because I want you to look up some more stuff for me, there's a very interesting thing that you brought up, which you wanted to discuss, and that was the partnership element of this, of how Cheteshwar Pujara was, an ace when it came to stringing up partnerships. And I actually came across this little graphic from ESPN Cricinfo that they produced, where it said India's partnership experts. And it kind of mentioned the highest percentage of team runs scored while at the crease. The number one batter on that list is Rahul Dravid. He scores 36.1% of India's runs while he's at the crease. Number two is Sunil Gavaskar at 34.9%, so not much between them. Number three, and the only other guy in the 30%ers is Pujara at 30.4%. And, regardless of who he's batting with, he does have a knack of kind of steadying the ship. And I feel like that definitely deserves a mention.
Yeah, I'll just correct you a bit. It's essentially about how many runs the team scores while they're at the crease. That's why you see the more stodgy and the defensive sort of batters, because they will stick around for a long period of time and they'll have more batters batting around them and scoring around them, right? So I think that's the interpretation of that. So,
Okay.
But yeah, completely agree that when Pujara was at the crease, there was an element of safety for the Indian team. And of course, these three batters are then followed by Sachin and Kohli. So absolutely elite stuff. And I think when we talk, of course, towards the end of the podcast, we'll talk about where he ranks among the great batters of his time and of all time for in context of an Indian cricket, and what is the verdict on him as a great? Like, do we think he's an all-time great, or is he very close to that? We'll talk about those things later, I feel, but
Yeah.
certainly I think in the very same piece that you're referring to, a very interesting stat for me has to be the fact that he has a very high balls per dismissal rate. Of course, we've been talking about the fact that he spends a lot of time when he's batting there.
Yeah.
But it's only 4 batters who score, who have a higher balls per dismissal rate. So it's Steve Smith, of course, nobody's surprised there. Then it's Kane Williamson, who also has well above 100 who also plays well above 100 balls per dismissal. Then there's Azhar Ali and Alistair Cook. So we see a sort of pattern here, right? Like, we're either seeing absolutely great batters who have a knack of scoring big runs, or we are seeing these defensive, long, stodgy sort of batters who can, really spend time at the crease, and they have certain elements of their game that are really effective in certain countries. And if you also interestingly see, Alistair Cook, Azhar Ali and Pujara, all of them did really well in Australia, and they were all also obviously really good in Asia as well. And that's pretty special for someone like Alistair Cook, I would say, because he was an English batter. But even for Azhar and Pujara, the fact that they were able to go to Australia and make runs, and Pujara, the fact that Pujara had to do it over long tours, over 3 tours. I think only his 2014-15 BGT was not very impressive in context, because that was a series where everybody was scoring a lot of runs. But mind you, even in that series, if you go back and look at the entry points of Virat Kohli, he was coming in at around the 30 over mark, and Pujara was facing a few balls. So I think, as Kohli himself credited Pujara for, making the new ball old, it's a very, very important part. And I think people often are like, okay, if a batter doesn't, a batter is just a stat padder if they're coming in, if they're not scoring enough runs, or if they're just, coming in after a good platform. But it's a team sport. We have to really understand that how this is how great teams are made, because when you have different sorts of players who can fulfill different roles for you.
True.
And of course, the fact that he had to fill the shoes of Rahul Dravid, that's never easy, man. Like,
Yeah, no, that
Rahul
is an
Dravid is
insanely
Rahul Dravid is India's third greatest Test batter ever.
Yeah,
And
insanely
of
difficult
course,
task
going to-
that. And
Yeah,
I mean,
that is
look, you've mentioned his dogged nature time and again, and how he has a really high balls per dismissal ratio, and that is what stands out. But I feel like in batting partnerships in particular, when you've got one of those guys at the other end, your partner, they feel like they've got more of a license to kind of play their own game. So I'm actually really curious to know, Shayan, who are Pujara's favorite batting partners? Like, who does he do best with on the crease?
So, the best way to look at this is partnership averages, like which are the most productive partnerships, when which batter and Pujara have the best averages. So, I think for a minimum of 10 innings, Rishabh Pant has the best, but he has only played 10 innings, and we all know what they did together in Australia.
That kind of proves my point, though, doesn't it?
They averaged 67.6 together, and they have scored 200s and 550 partnerships.
Wow.
So that's a very crucial one. Then the other player I would say is Murli Vijay, who averages 62. Even with Kohli and Rahane, he's averaging 43, 42. And they all have like 7-century partnerships, 6-century partnerships. With Vijay, he has 10-century partnerships,
Nice.
which I find quite interesting. So
Lovely.
It really, I think, makes sense in a way, because Murli Vijay was also a very good opener for India for a period of time. And maybe because the second opener, I assume that the second opener gets out, and that's how these two, bat together, and then they set the platform for Kohli, Rahane and everyone, and then they make runs.
True.
Like, I think that's the ideal scenario for India, right? In this context.
We
that
keep
we're talking
discussing
about.
how he's had a major impact on Kohli's career. I want one of you guys in my team at Good Areas, or some nerd on Reddit who is listening to this podcast, to come up with some sort of metric which shows us assisted runs and how much of Virat's runs is Pujara responsible for by delaying his entry points. Like, there's got to be a mathematical way to get to the bottom of this, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, you can look at stuff like how a batter performs in later entry points and how many of those balls Pujara faced. Like, I gave you the example of that 2014-15 Border Gavaskar Trophy, right? Of course, Pujara didn't have a great series. We're not going to come here and say that, okay, everything that, just because Pujara is retired, everything he has done is like all ideal and there is absolutely no flaw in that. But the fact that he was able to do what he did, that is spend time on the crease, we keep saying this over and over again, but it makes life easier for the others. And that's why I gave the example of that Border Gavaskar Trophy, because
100,
that was a very
100%.
productive series for Kohli, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, there's more stuff to discuss with respect to Cheteshwar Pujara, but it's also time for a short break. You guys are watching the Footmarks podcast with Shayan and Behram, and go nowhere, because we will be back and talk about some other fun comparisons and nitty-gritty details about the test career of Cheteshwar Pujara.
Support us on Patreon and help us keep making our content. Join for exclusive perks like the AMAs, the live calls, and to chat with me directly on Discord. You can also enjoy ad-free content, early podcasts, and access to my emailer.
Welcome back to the Footmarks podcast. You guys are with Shayan and Behram, and we're talking about the life and times of Cheteshwar Pujara on a cricket field facing the red ball. All right, so a few times in this podcast, we have talked about some other comparable players. I think the most freakish comparison with respect to Cheteshwar Pujara when it comes to another number 3 batter in his same generation, same era, right, is Azhar Ali. Their styles are very similar. They are both very dogged. They put a high price on their wicket. They both drop off in the pace-playing pandemic, and they both score runs in Australia as well. Just the raw numbers, right? Do you have them in front of you? Because they are eerily similar. It's kind of freakish, isn't it? Because I know both of them have 19 test tons and 35 test 50s, and their averages, batting averages are like a few decimals apart, aren't they?
Yeah. Azhar Ali averages 42.26 and Pujara is at 43.61.
Okay,
like,
so
that's the only
1.4.
difference in terms of
Runs per innings
that's
is what separates
about
them.
around 1.4 runs.
Yeah.
So, and Azhar has played 97 test matches. Pujara has played 101. 103, I would think. I think this probably excludes the games where he was, where he was not available, where probably he was not batting. Like, he didn't face a ball. Sometimes that happens, if there's a rain-affected game or something.
Yeah.
Maybe
So how many
that is
runs
what
have they
is
both
not
scored?
included
They're
here.
both in the early 7,000s from what I remember.
Yep. 7-1-4-2 for Azhar Ali. And for Pujara, it is 7-1-9-5.
Wow. So we're talking about 53
7-1-4-2.
runs.
And 7, yeah, exactly.
That's crazy, man. And it's also weird how they're both extremely similar to each other, not just as cricketers, but also as human beings. They both, played with a lot of dignity. You cannot think of a single instance where they were surrounded by controversy or they said something, bullish. They're generally nice blokes, and I feel it's kind of crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, it's good. I think usually you like people who, just want to mind their own business, conduct themselves well, and all those sorts of things. Of course, on the field, you do want to see some spice and drama and excitement, but I think the way his teammates speak about him, I think that's the most important thing for me. How do your peers respect you? What do they think about you? And it's been lovely seeing the tributes from the Indian team players, from the former players, and even I'm sure even I think I was listening to the Willow Talk podcast, and they were also talking about Pujara. So his legacy, I think, is very well known to everybody, and I think he's a very good guy, no doubts about it. And the parallels with Azhar Ali are very uncanny.
They are very uncanny. But even if we look at the drop-offs, they both have significant slides. These guys are pretty much on the top of the world, batting at number 3. And they're scoring heaps of runs. They're even scoring runs, in Australia. And generally, they have become like backbones for their teams. And then comes the pace-playing pandemic. The wobble seam era begins and batters start to score less runs. And 2018 onwards, the slide is dramatic. Both of them kind of share that little aspect in their careers. And I just want to know, if you've got the numbers handy, how much does Cheteshwar Pujara average versus pace bowling overall? And then how much does he average in the pace-playing pandemic, 2018 onwards? Because I'm really curious about this.
That would be interesting to look up. I'll actually, just...
Yeah, because I really want to dispel this myth that it was the rank turners that got him. They didn't, honestly. He was such an elite player of spin.
I mean, he actually didn't make a lot of runs at home from 2019, 2020 onwards. So I think that's probably a fair statement to say.
That's also a general dip, right? Like you expect people to regress in some form. So, I mean...
Agreed.
I don't think I'll really put it down to rank
No,
turners.
I can see that
I'm convinced with respect to my theory. I haven't done any research, but I'm expecting you to show me numbers which prove me right. Because honestly, I have not put a foot wrong in this podcast without doing any research.
So against pace, he averages 34.6 in test matches.
That is quite low, isn't it?
If we look at it, the split by venue country, so in Australia, it's 36.8. In England, it's 24.5. South Africa, 23.1. New Zealand, 18.2. West Indies, 12.5. And in Asia, actually, if you look at his numbers, in India, it's 52.2. Sri Lanka, it's 46. And Bangladesh, he hasn't gotten out for 62 runs. So in Asia, he was brilliant against pace bowling. But I think, when he went outside Asia, there is an element of his averages dropping. And outside Asia, he really countered spin pretty well. So, and that definitely helps. If you go back and look at some of his best knocks, I'm sure, and you can go and ask Nathan Lyon, I think that is the best. I think that is, if I'm not wrong, that is the most common matchup of this modern generation or something like that. I don't have the numbers handy in front of me right now.
Just based on the number of deliveries he played, right?
I remember Jared doing a piece.
Common.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, so what are the numbers for him or Pujara versus pace 2018 onwards?
So if we do it 2018 onwards, he averages 26.7 against pace.
So it does drop, right? Like if his overall batting average versus pace is 34 point something, and in the pace playing pandemic it's dropped to 26 point something, then that has played a significant role. How about we look at pre-2018? Just for comparison sake,
we can.
Right?
But before that, I would like to actually, point out his average in Australia is still 37.8. So
well, that's basically one of his, defining factors within his legacy.
Exactly.
Right?
So he does manage to find a way to score runs there. Against fast bowling, but even in India it actually drops to 28.4, interestingly.
There you go.
I wonder what happened there. From 20 innings he gets out to pace 10 times.
Wow.
I think your theories are becoming right by every single moment.
This is without zero homework. This is all on the top of my head, guys. I've had a busy day. But I have watched his entire career, right? So I mean, there is a bit of an eye test over here. What is his average versus pace up until the end of 2017? Is it 40 something? Because it's got to be 40 something.
44.4.
There you go. So, hence proven, Behram is right. It's the wobble scene that gets him. And I mean, look, he obviously is not invincible. He is a human being. And I wouldn't consider Pujara an all-time great. I think he is an integral part of that particular Indian team, though. I feel like the Pujara song needs to be sung a bit more, because without him at number 3, a lot of other pieces start falling out of place. And as soon as his form drops, other batters stop scoring runs as well. So you pose this question, right? Where does he rank amongst the best Indian test batters of all time? And let me just do this on the top of my head as well. I'm not saying this in any particular order, but guys I'd have ahead of him are Sachin, Gavaskar, Dravid. That's probably in order, actually. Virat Kohli, Virender Sehwag. And now I'll have to think. VVS, actually, I'd probably take VVS ahead of him, even though VVS, actually, no. He's definitely
Bats at
ahead
5
of him.
and 6.
Yeah. Who would you have below VVS?
That's, I mean, the interesting one, because
we,
there are a
we
lot
could
of great
go
Indian batters of
prehistoric
the
as
past
well.
as well.
You could bring in the Vijay Merchants, in conversation. Yeah.
Vijay Hazare, Vijay Merchant,
Yeah.
also great test batters.
Both the
for India.
Vijays.
Of course, their sample sizes are not as huge in comparison. But
How does he fare versus Veng Sarkar?
we
That's
can
an
actually
interesting
look up his match factor, I think. But I think he does have the most runs at number 3. So after Rahul Dravid, it's him who, has the best this thing. But I think he's probably in that Veng Sarkar, Gundappa Vishwanath, and Amarnath sort of a tier. Where Amarnath was a bit of a different sort of test batter. I think he was scoring a lot of runs away from home, but he wasn't scoring as many at home. So there's a bit of a difference there. But I would have to say that yes, Pujara is easily in the top 10 greatest test batters from India. For sure. Of his generation, he's easily the second best.
For sure, because I feel like he might drop down to 11 or 12 when we really do the deep dive on this. Because we've taken a few names over here.
Actually, for sure might be a bit of a blanket statement to make. But
and then, of course, are we just going to...
conversation for top 10.
Are we just going to rule out Rishabh Pant?
I want to wait a little. I see the thing with Rishabh Pant is, I do rate him very highly. And I think I have said this on times that I think he is better than Pujara even. Simply because of the sort of madness that he has done. Those clutch knocks and he's very clutch consistently. So, but I think we also have to factor in that there is always a late career decline for a lot of the batters. And if Pant also has that, who knows where he finishes, because back in 2017, even we would be having, back till that Border Gavaskar Trophy of 2018-19, we would also be having better conversations about Pujara, right? So, I think we have to probably wait a little more in that sense. But yeah, I think
agreed.
He's definitely in the conversation for the 10 best test batters that India have ever produced. And
I would say
a special player for India.
More so along the lines of he's in the conversation as opposed to he's definitely in the top 10, for me at least. And I don't want to kind of, throw any shade on him. It's just that India have produced so many good batters over the years. And if I think about it, in this era, Azharuddin was also there. Of course he is, right?
He was also...
If you look at the era that Pujara played in, I feel like he's probably second only to Virat in terms of impact. And when I'm saying impact, I'm not saying impetus. I mean how important his role is with respect to the success of the other batters in his team.
Yeah, completely agree. And I think, of course, no matter how much we dive deep into everything and all those things, averages do matter. And I think over a long time period, after Virat Kohli, it was Cheteshwar Pujara who had the best average. And, the craziest thing, you will actually not... I don't know if you know it, but he did have a better average than Joe Root till like 2020.
Yeah.
Cheteshwar Pujara was not... We're not talking about some, just some pinch blocker, some blocker who was not scoring a lot of runs, dodgy. The adjective that we've used the most is grit and stodginess and all those sorts of things, but he made a lot of runs and he made sure that he tired out the bowlers. And that's another point that we probably didn't mention earlier, but tiring out the bowlers and playing for that much time, it just, it frustrates the other team as well, I feel, when you're an elite defensive batter.
It's an ode to his patience and his courage as well, because he is copping a lot of blows in Australia at least, and he doesn't really flinch much, right? Like, he does kind of brave it out over there. And he was just someone who really, I feel like he was dedicated to his role and he knew what he was good at. And he was like, all right, I'm going to maximize my strengths over here and I'm going to chart out the best possible career for myself that I can with, keeping in mind how I can benefit my team the absolute most. And he does come across as a bit of a team player, to me at least, Pujara does. And based on all of the accolades that he's getting from his teammates and other former Indian players and all of that stuff, I feel like, and even in county cricket, man, I mean, he's had a lot of success over there. A lot of people,
as well.
a lot of people actually sing his praise. I remember he once shared the dressing room with Rizwan, And both of those guys loved each other, right? Like they were actually huge fans of each other's games. So I feel like, we can all talk about when we are attempting to define Pujara's legacy, and I think I tweeted this as well. We can talk about his grit and dogged nature, and we can also discuss his spin game, his success versus Australia and in Australia, and throw in him being really good at stringing partnerships as well. But for me personally, I feel like the fact that Pujara was generally a really good bloke who doesn't have many haters and everyone just has good things to say about him, that really does stand out, because the more I work in cricket, the more I realize that, you don't really find good people all that frequently, and Pujara does stand out in that regard.
Yeah, no, definitely. As I said earlier, you always like to respect a person who minds their own business.
Yeah.
And, he's a very respectful guy. You see him speak on, on all these post-match, mid-match shows and those things that happen. I think I like his work there as well. He's pretty...
True.
He speaks well. I wouldn't say he's like a very eloquent speaker in the sense that maybe like an Ashwin or maybe even Kohli or some other guys of his generation would be, but he speaks well. He's not very outspoken in that sense, but I think he has a very good point most of the time. From wherever
I don't
can
mind it at all.
recall.
I think
I like his presence is basically what I'm saying, because I don't actually listen to a lot of those shows, but whenever I've had the chance to, I do like him. That combination of him with the other panel, I think it was pretty good.
Yeah. I saw him a bit on the pavilion, actually. He was sitting with Wasim and Vakar and everyone. And you know what, from what little I've seen of Cheteshwar Pujara in the media, I can only speak to that, but yes, I agree. He's not the most animated, and maybe he lacks a bit of that energy which hooks in viewers and listeners. But he is a very technical guy, and when he speaks or talks about the game, he does take a very, very technical angle, and that's what does make him a good pundit or analyst. And he's someone who has kind of seen Test cricket evolve right before his eyes, and I feel like there's a career in there. I really do genuinely feel that Pujara could...
Seems like that.
Yeah, he could really,
I forgot about DK actually, because I think DK is also another one who is...
But DK is animated. And DK's technical analysis is a wee bit limited to wicket keeping. He's good at that, don't get me wrong. He's really good when he's talking about wicket keeping. But generally, he is the sort of guy who is, interesting, or not interesting. What's the right word over here? He is an affable guy, right?
Yeah.
Like, he's good to listen to at times.
Yeah.
So I think like Pujara is a very technical, person or
agree with
cricketer,
you.
and that kind of shows in his game as well. And like I said, man, all these things that we have discussed in this show, they do hold a lot of weight, and they do ultimately contribute towards his legacy. But I have mad respect for him for like just being a good guy, because I have never seen a single person complain about him or say something harsh about him. Everyone just sings his praise as far as Pujara the human is concerned. And maybe this bit is not discussed on all the other podcasts that are talking about Cheteshwar Pujara right now.
No, I think definitely that's a very valid point, As I said, how you treat people around you, it matters a lot in the larger scheme of things, because ultimately we are all just playing a sport. Like these players they're all just playing a sport. We are all talking about the sport. So apart from the sport also, it really matters how you conduct yourself on the field or off the field. On the field, I would still say yes, I do enjoy watching players who have that fight in them. I'm not going to shy away and say that yes, I want only good boys on the cricket field, but you do respect the good boys for sure. And especially, as I keep saying, it's how your teammates, how your peers talk about you, and that definitely matters a lot to me as well.
He has definitely left an imprint on the sport. I feel like whenever 50 years from now, people are looking at the annals of Test cricket history, Cheteshwar Pujara's name will come up in some way, shape, or form. And I mean, if you're watching this, Puji, like from myself and the entire Good Areas team, we wish you a very happy retirement. Go well. Continue to speak on the game on different mediums. And thank you for everything that you have delivered, both in an Indian shirt and generally as an ambassador of cricket.
Yeah, absolutely, man.
Yeah. Do you want to have a moment with him, or should we end this podcast?
I think we can spend a bit more time, talking about some of his best knocks and what sort of crisis situations he's bailed the team out of at times. I think we've obviously stressed a lot about the averages and where he scored runs and why he's been good, why the drop-off happened. But I think we have to give a shout-out to some of the knocks, I think. What do you think?
I'll give you a minute.
You give me 5 knocks, then I'll give you 5 different knocks. I think that will
No,
be fun.
I think you should just list down the knocks that you've thought of because
No,
you
I don't have a list as
you
such.
would you would
I'll
have more
just go for
vivid
it.
memories of them, right? For me, they're
You
kind
go
of
for it, I think,
clubbed
first.
together. I remember early days Pujara versus Australia at home, where he
Yeah.
scores what, like back-to-back double hundreds, is it? If memory serves me correct.
He scores a 72 on his debut in the 4th innings chase
Yeah.
back in 2010.
But
he has
he
a double
does-
hundred against England in 2012.
Yeah, there you go. It's England, actually. He does get a lot of really high scores in 2013 and 14, if I am correct over here. I think that's the
He
year.
gets 153 in South Africa, as I said.
Yes,
2014,
yes.
I don't think was as great for him when
Yeah,
India
so sorry,
went abroad.
2012. 2012 and 2013. Those are his 2 years.
2013.
He scores 600s in 23 innings in that spell of 2 years. He averages 81.75 in 2012 and 75.36 in 2013.
Oh, yeah, this brings me to one more point. I'm sorry I'm interrupting you, but
Yeah.
I think what happens is that Pujara really settled into Test cricket very easily, and we don't always see even some of the great batters do that. And what this does is this spoils the fans. They are like every new batter who's going to come in, he's going to score runs immediately after they come in. But that doesn't always happen that way. And of course, it's the life of a cricketer, it's the life of an athlete to, have their ups and downs. But we do have to give Pujara some credit for, making that transition a tad easier. Because back then, after Rahul Dravid and VVS Lakshman went, it was Pujara who was India's best test batter at home, I would have to say that. And Kohli was also pretty decent. Dhoni was also actually having a good run back then. And Sachin was not so good towards the back end of his career, but of course, that was after what he did for all those years. And so in that transition period back at home, Pujara was, I think, definitely one of India's most important, I think India's most important batter for sure. From that 2012 to 2013 period for me. Yeah.
Agreed. All right, you wanted me to pick 5 knocks. I'm going to pick all 3 knocks or all 3 tons that he scores in the 2018-19 Border Gavaskar Trophy. I think they have to get a mention over here. Like, what was it? Adelaide, the MCG and the SCG?
Adelaide.
I think all 3 of those, you can put them for me in my top 5. And
In
apart from
Adelaide,
that...
Yeah.
In
Adelaide, you also have to talk about how well he batted with the tail. And that also happens at Southampton earlier in the same year. So I think that was also an element of his game that we saw at times. And as I keep saying that it wasn't that he's just a defensive batter who's always doing, tuk, 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 but he can also, really push. And the way he played against spin was obviously, you've seen more cricket than me. You know that his style of playing spin was very, stepping down. He used his feet a lot. And whenever I was watching his highlights or just whenever I've seen him bat, his style is a bit different, don't you think? Like the way he plays.
Yeah, I would say so. And I mean, he has 2 double hundreds
It's
versus
not a
Australia.
free-flowing bat the way
in India
it's for
as well,
a Kohli
right?
or a Rahane.
Yeah, that's true. It is a bit different or peculiar, you could say.
It's a different style, but it's fun. Yeah.
Anyway, you wanted me to pick 5 knocks. I gave you all 5
Go
tons
for it,
versus Australia. 2 double hundreds at home and then the 3 hundreds in Australia and 2018-19 Border Gavaskar Trophy.
I'll give you one knock. I'll give you a very good, interesting knock that you would also like. So back in South Africa in the Johannesburg Test of 2018, we talked about 2013, right? But even in 2018, when India won that Test match, Pujara took 53 balls to get off the mark. And in that innings, he faced 179 deliveries.
Of
He
course,
scored
we remember
50
that,
runs and he
right?
faced-
Like, this became a meme.
I know, right? And that Test match was actually, I think, a bit special for me because India won that Test match and it started off their run away from home in a way. Like, it was one of their first few Test matches of this new Indian team, going and winning away from home. So, and Pujara was an important part of that. He made 50 of 179 deliveries, and it showed that even on a very, very difficult surface, he had that dog in him to really stick it out for a long period of time. Then I talked about that.
Yeah, let's just say on a closing note that Pujara or that knock of 50 of 179, that is incredible if you think about it. He puts the dog in dogged. And I don't think anything else needs to be discussed further unless you have any final notes. I think it's time that we wrap this up.
Yeah. No, I think absolutely it was, a pleasure to watch his Test career for sure. And he's been a very special part of this Indian team. As an Indian fan for the longest time, the Test team was a very close part of my heart. And I think what has happened is that maybe in that moment, I didn't always appreciate a lot of the players. Maybe I was more, inclined towards certain players, maybe like for the likes of a Kohli or a Bumrah or Pant. Those more exciting players is what I was probably more, even Shubman Gill when he had that series down under his first tour. I was probably more attracted towards those sorts of players. But I would have to say that as this Indian team has now gone into the sunset, it really feels, special to, look back and actually acknowledge what all they have achieved in their careers, the likes of Ashwin, Pujara, and I think Jadeja is the only last one standing right now.
Yeah.
Rahane, of course, he still thinks he can play Test cricket, but even he has stepped down from Mumbai's captaincy, so I don't really think he's in the scheme of things anymore either, and I don't really see him playing another Test match. Shami as well, I don't really see them getting him back, but it was a very special team and they achieved a lot of great things. I would have to say that, yes, there were a few missed opportunities, but the fact that they were not able to, they didn't lose a single series for nearly 12 years. They were winning every series, mind you. It was not even like draws in the middle or anything like that. And that was there. And away from home, obviously, we talked about Australia, them fighting in England, South Africa. I think, as I keep saying, Pujara was a very, very important part of that. And as I would probably say, he was the fifth best player of his Indian, fifth or sixth, fifth. Yeah, I would have to say fifth, because fifth or sixth maybe if you're inclined towards Rishabh Pant, but he was one of India's best players of their greatest Indian Test team. And that's
he has a bigger
for me.
volume of games, when of course you're comparing
more
him to
body
Rishabh
of work
Pant,
than
so,
Rishabh for sure.
Yeah, of course. I think
batting
fifth is
them,
probably,
watching them bat together in that 21 series was also very exciting for sure, and even they mentioned that in their tweets. So
I
think very best of luck to Pujara for sure for whatever he does.
Fifth best is probably
privilege
apt
watching
in
him.
that particular team. But again, it's a career that's worth celebrating. I think we've covered it
absolutely.
pretty much in entirety on this podcast. And like I said earlier, go well in retirement, Cheteshwar, and enjoy your days ahead. Thank you for your services to cricket. And you guys let us know, all of our viewers and listeners, in the comment section below, how would you define Cheteshwar Pujara's legacy in Test cricket? Because I think we've taken a fair stab at it, and there's not much else to discuss. I think that pretty much sums things up and wraps up this podcast. Just a quick reminder, you guys can go to goodareas.co and bookmark that webpage, and that can prove to be your one-stop shop for all the fun work that we do as part of this team, whether it be written content, podcasts, or videos. And of course, as I mentioned earlier in the show, all of our podcasts on Good Areas Network, they are powered by our supporters on Patreon. You can become one of them by going to Patreon/Good Areas Podcast, and that way you can enjoy ad-free content. You can talk to us exclusively, and you can even give us recommendations on crick picks and footmarks and whatnot. It's a very inclusive community, so I would definitely encourage you to join it. And we will see you soon again on another show. Could be a crick picks, could be a live show. Jared will be back soon as well. He's got a few red inkers recorded, which you guys can look forward to, with some very, very important and interesting players. So some great conversations in line for you all on Good Areas. But that's all for now, folks. Have a good one, and goodbye.
Brian Lara used pot plants to work on his placement. John Wright glued his glove to his bat. Sachin Tendulkar dug up practice pitches. Tatenda Taibu cut the top off his bat. Claire Taylor used a hockey grip. Steve Smith was from tennis. Dean Jones would call phantom runs, and Victor Trumper turned the nets into a war zone to survive. The best batters in the world do whatever they have to make runs. We have told their stories in our new book, The Art of Batting.